Hello, everybody, and welcome to History Bite number 231, dated April 18th, 2021. I'm Walter, your mobile historian and blue-collar scholar. This History Bite is entitled President Nixon's Supreme Court Appointments. As a Supreme Court buff, it gives me great pleasure to teach you all about the history of our nation's highest court, an institution that I love and certainly, feel it is important that the American public know and understand. All right. It is a very rich history, so allow me to continue doing so as much as possible. Let's get to it. Richard Milhouse Nixon served as the 37th President of the United States of America from January 20th, 1969 until August 9th, 1974, due to his resignation before the completion of his second term. To date, Richard Nixon is the only American president to ever have resigned from office. In spite of that, President Nixon would make 4 appointments to the Supreme Court of the United States between 1969 and 1971, all within his first term, as a matter of fact. All right. He would replace the following 4 individuals on the Supreme Court. All right. Chief Justice Earl Warren, Associate Justice Abe Fortas, Associate Justice Hugo Black, and Associate Justice John Marshall Harlan II. All right. Nixon's appointments certainly pushed the court further to the right than what it was or had been for the past 15 years. But they didn't exactly push it as far to the right as he wished. All right. That's the name of the game sometimes. All right. So, President Nixon's first opportunity at appointing a member to the Supreme Court came from the already submitted retirement letter of Chief Justice Earl Warren. Indeed, Warren had submitted his intention to retire to President Lyndon Johnson, Nixon's predecessor in the presidency, in 1968. However, due to the failure of the U.S. Senate to confirm Johnson's nominee to replace Warren, Associate Justice Abe Fortas, Warren stayed on the court for another term, thus allowing the incoming president, Richard Nixon, to name his successor. All right. For the record, Richard Nixon and Earl Warren were political enemies. The two literally detested one another. And this goes back to the days of both men being prominent political figures in California. All right. Nixon thought very little of Warren, and Warren thought even less of Nixon. Okay, but that's for another video. All right. So with Warren's already submitted letter of retirement, President Nixon considered several men to replace him on the Supreme Court, including Associate Justice Potter Stewart, as well as former New York Governor Thomas Dewey, who, interestingly enough, had Earl Warren on his ticket as vice president in 1948. They were the Republicans. All right. So Associate Justice Potter Stewart had no desire to be elevated to the position of Chief Justice. Okay. And former Governor Thomas Dewey also had no interest in judicial office. Okay. So with that in mind, he then turned his attention to Chief Judge Warren E. Burger of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia, a.k.a. the D.C. Circuit. All right. Burger had already developed a very powerful reputation as a conservative jurist, going in on many of the Warren Court's decisions as being too pro-criminal. All right. And he especially attacked the Warren Court's seeming endorsement of lawlessness and the lack of consideration for a good, orderly society. Burger even made a very powerful speech attacking the provisions in the Bill of Rights that ensure procedural safeguards for the accused, saying that no country in the world does more to protect criminals than America. With all due respect, sir, those safeguards really are for the innocent, not the guilty, so to speak. All right. But he didn't look at it that way. So in any case, Burger's position certainly made him very appealing to President Nixon. And as such, with Burger in making these speeches and this commentary, indirectly campaigning for the job anyway, President Nixon nominated him to be Chief Justice of the United States to replace Earl Warren. All right. His nomination didn't garner much opposition and indeed sailed through pretty quickly, all things considered. And he was confirmed by the U.S. Senate by a vote of 74-3 in early June of 1969 and was sworn in as Chief Justice on June 23rd, 1969. Okay. Replacing Earl Warren, who had been Chief Justice since 1953. All right. Burger would serve on the court until his retirement in 1986. He would be replaced by Associate Justice William Hubbs Rehnquist. Okay? So that's Nixon's first appointment. His second appointment came with the unexpected resignation of Associate Justice Abe Fortas in 1969, May of that year to be specific. Fortas had abruptly resigned from the court due to almost certain impeachment with respect to his numerous ethical violations with his finances. All right. All of his dirty laundry had come out during his confirmation hearings the year before. Okay. And his political opponents certainly used that against him in an attempt to get off the court. One of his primary opponents, President Richard Nixon. All right. And so that certainly worked well for the Nixon presidency, who was obviously looking to put more people on the court. So with Fortas gone, all right, the opportunity to appoint another justice presented itself, and Nixon considered several people for the vacancy. All right, excuse me. His first choice was prominent Virginia lawyer Lewis Franklin Powell, but Powell had no interest in judicial office. Okay, so then he would nominate conservative jurist Clement Haynsworth to the vacancy in August of '69, but the Senate viewed Haynsworth as, very, very out of touch and certainly not worthy of a Supreme Court seat and rejected his nomination. In January of 1970, Nixon would then nominate G. Harold Carswell for that vacancy, but he too was viewed as far too conservative and out of touch to be on the Supreme Court. His nomination was also rejected by the Senate. All right. So, in his fourth attempt to fill the seat, President Nixon would then nominate U.S. Court of Appeals for the Seventh Circuit Judge Harry Andrew Blackmun for that seat. You know that name, don't you? All right. Nixon nominated Blackmun in April of 1970. Blackmun was a fairly moderate, conservative federal court of appeals judge who had not really written anything to get on anybody's nerves, all right, nor expressed serious concern over him serving on the Supreme Court. As a matter of fact, his nomination garnered no opposition in the Senate at all, and he was confirmed by a voice vote of 94-0 in May of 1970. Blackmun was sworn in as an Associate Justice of the Supreme Court on June 9th, 1970, filling the seat that had been vacant by the resignation of Justice Fortas more than a year earlier. All right. Blackmun became a legend very early in his time on the court with his authorship of the court's very controversial yet unquestionably landmark decision in Roe versus Wade in 1973, which established a woman's right to an abortion as a constitutionally protected right. All right. We're not going to get into the merits of that, but that's the decision that made Blackmun a legend, all right? Harry Blackmun would serve on the Supreme Court until his retirement in 1994, and he would be succeeded by First Circuit U.S. Court of Appeals Judge Stephen Breyer, who continues to serve on the court to this day at the time of this recording, all right? So that's President Nixon's second appointment. His third appointment and fourth appointment essentially came together with the abrupt retirements of Associate Justices Hugo Black and John Marshall Harlan II. All right? Hugo Black and John Marshall Harlan II. All right? Black stepped down in August of 1971, and Harlan stepped down in September of 1971. Okay? Now, with these two retirements so close, President Nixon obviously considered quite a few people to fill the vacancies. Okay? The leading two contenders, however, would ultimately be Arkansas Attorney General Herschel Friday and California Judge Mildred Lilly. Okay, but interestingly enough, neither one was considered qualified by the American Bar Association. Like I said, Herschel Friday was an Arkansas attorney, a prominent one, obviously prominent enough to gain the president's attention. And Mildred Lilly was a California appeals court judge who actually was prominent in her own right. All right, she had been overturned very little, and she was very respected for her decisions. But despite this, the American Bar Association turned both of them down as unqualified. It's very understandable why they voted against Mildred Lilly, because she was a woman, and this is 1971. We are not yet at that point where they feel it's time for a woman to be on the Supreme Court. All right. But the real reason Nixon didn't go forward with her nomination was because Warren Burger, Chief Justice at that point, threatened to resign from the court if President Nixon appointed a woman. And that was not just a threat, that was a promise. All right. Again, it's a little too early in the minds of many for a woman to be on the Supreme Court at this point. You know, I certainly don't agree with that. But, you know, this is 1971. You have to understand the context of the times, folks. All right. So with Herschel Friday, the Arkansas attorney, and Mildred Lilly, the California appeals court judge, thrown out by the American Bar Association, Richard Nixon then once again turned to a prominent Virginia lawyer for whom he had great respect, Lewis Franklin Powell, who, after a little bit of arm twisting, finally agreed to accept the nomination, as well as Assistant Attorney General William Hubbs Rehnquist. All right. These two men would be his chosen ones for the vacancies of Hugo Black and John Marshall Harlan II. And as such, they would be formally nominated to serve in October of 1971 as Associate Justices of the U.S. Supreme Court. Powell sailed through the Senate with very little of any opposition. As a matter of fact, and he was confirmed by a voice vote of 89-1 on December 6th, 1971. All right, no problem. William Rehnquist, however, didn't fare as well. And as a matter of fact, there was significant opposition to his confirmation to be on the court by numerous groups as well as labor unions. You know, Rehnquist had did a lot of shady, questionable activities, you know, in his younger days. And lots of people worried about having such a reactionary guy on the Supreme Court. All right. Certainly understandable. All right. And he, as a matter of fact, would go through the same thing 15 years later when President Reagan nominated him to be Chief Justice in 1986 with the retirement of Chief Justice Warren Burger. All right. Although the opposition to Rehnquist was significant here in 1971, it was not enough to derail his nomination, and he was confirmed on December 10th, 1971 by a vote of 68-26 by the U.S. Senate. Okay, both Powell and Rehnquist were sworn in as Associate Justices of the Supreme Court of the United States on January 7th, 1972. All right, thus completing the Nixon appointments to the nation's highest court. Now, Powell would go on to serve from 1972 until his retirement in 1987. He was a very moderate jurist, quite often a swing vote in many very controversial cases during his 15 years on the high court. All right. And his retirement, let's just say, was nothing short of a circus with respect to the confirmation hearings for the nominees that would be put forth to replace him. All right. It's always hard when you're replacing a swing vote, you know, like Powell was. All right. And President Reagan nominated Judge Robert Bork, who was ultra conservative U.S. Federal Court of Appeals judge on the D.C. Circuit, whose nomination drew such outrage and opposition that it was ultimately rejected by the Senate. And it is from Judge Robert Bork that we get the verb borked with respect to Supreme Court nominations that are effectively derailed. All right. You know, I did a video on Judge Robert Bork, so if you want to check that out, feel free, you know, and I stand by my position in that video. All right. So with Bork gone, also nominated was Judge Douglas Ginsburg, all right, who, when it was found out he had smoked marijuana in college, not in college, but in his younger years. I forget exactly the point when he did it, but this is the 80s. This is the ultra-conservative anti-drug era, and when that was discovered, that was the end of his nomination, and, he ultimately withdrew himself from consideration. So that's when we got Anthony Kennedy. You know that name, don't you? Moderate conservative on the Ninth Circuit, put forth by President Reagan to replace Powell. All right, and ultimately Kennedy was confirmed without hardly any opposition. All right, and he served on the court until his retirement in 2018. All right, like Powell before him, Kennedy would be a powerful swing vote in many very important cases over his 30 years of service on the court. Okay, with William Rehnquist. All right, Rehnquist served as an associate justice from 1972 until his elevation to Chief Justice in 1986. To date, he is the most recent Associate Justice to be elevated to Chief Justice. All right? He served as Chief Justice from 1986 until his death in September of 2005, something I remember very, very well. Okay? During his time on the court, Rehnquist was a very inflexible and committed conservative, all right? He was one of the few jurists who you already knew where he stood even before you said your first word as an advocate, all right? Very conservative man who truly fulfilled Nixon's expectations for a strict constructionist, all right? To date, Rehnquist is the most recent Chief Justice to die in office, okay? And he was succeeded by U.S. Court of Appeals judge for U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia, Judge John Glover Roberts, all right, who continues to serve as Chief Justice of the Supreme Court to this very day. Okay, Roberts was, of course, appointed to the court by President George W. Bush in 2005. All right, so. He didn't have a whole lot of judicial experience, but it's all good. 'Tis what it is. So for that, we have the 4 appointments by President Richard Nixon to the Supreme Court of the United States. All right. And once again, they were Warren E. Burger to replace Chief Justice Earl Warren. Burger served from 1969 until 1986. Next, we have Harry Andrew Blackmun, who served from 1970 until his retirement in 1994. Next, we have Lewis Franklin Powell, who served from 1972 until his retirement in 1987. And William Hubbs Rehnquist, who served as an Associate Justice from 1972 to 86. And then as Chief Justice from 1986 to 2005 when he passed away. Okay, and once again succeeded by John Roberts, who is the incumbent Chief Justice of the United States at the time of this recording. All right, so that's President Nixon's appointments to the Supreme Court of the United States. Any questions or controversies, leave them down below and I'll be happy to answer them. If you enjoyed this video and learned a thing or 5 from it, drop me a like. I greatly appreciate that. And of course, if you've not subscribed to my channel, I would graciously appreciate it more than anything if you did so right now. Just hit that little red subscribe button right there and we will be in business, folks. All right, your support is truly appreciated. All right. And if you want to donate to my channel financially, that's appreciated. Making these videos is hard work, remembering all this information. It's this is a vast library right here, and we want to make sure, even with references sometimes, we're getting the right information out to you. All right. So that's all that there. Thank you so much for listening. I appreciate you if you've made it this far, and hopefully your perspective has been enhanced on 1 or 10 things. Again, thanks a lot. I appreciate all of you. Take care, stay safe out there, be blessed in all you do, and I'll talk to you at the next video. Peace.